Hello. Welcome to this Masterboards mini course. So the purpose of this course is to discuss Masterboards, talk about them and the legalities of Masterboards, and also to create 2 or 3 different Masterboards and items using those Masterboards. So Masterboards are basically pretty papers that can be made to use as backgrounds. They're either painted, collaged, or mixed media works. In this course, we're going to look at the collaged and mixed media masterboard elements, and we're going to talk about 2 different types of masterboards that we can create for our journals and ephemera. So we're not looking at painted masterboards at all. The first type is a piece of work that you simply create and cut up straight away to make ephemera. The second type of masterboard is a work that you would create to scan and then use repeatedly as backgrounds. So let's talk about the first type of masterboard first. If you create a masterboard to be a one-off background paper to cut and use, you're safe to use many different types of things in this work. You might use book pages, stickers, digital kits that you've purchased, original postage stamps, rubber stamps and stencils. Some of these elements you might use in this masterboard will certainly be protected by copyright. If you're creating this type of masterboard, you definitely shouldn't scan it and reproduce it in any way. Even if you are creating this type of masterboard not to scan, first you should read the terms and conditions of the digital kits you're using. Most designers will allow you to use their kits in work that you make to sell, but you should always check. You should also read the copyright notices in the front of the books you might use, because some books do state you cannot use any part of the publication for any purpose. That would include using it in artwork. Rubber stamps and stencils, again, they are going to be protected by copyright or terms of use or angel policies. There are a lot of people out there that do not agree angel policies are a legally binding contract, but I would always be safe rather than sorry and not use them, and it's also respectful to follow the owner's request. We're only talking about if you're scanning your masterboard here, don't forget that. When we create a masterboard using other people's work, this is a form of art reproduction, and we call this a derivative work. There is really complex copyright law relating to derivative work, and in many cases the original artist will retain the copyright, and this is when legal action can be taken if you are not using images correctly. Be safe, do not scan this type of masterboard. Okay, let's move on to the second type of masterboard. How we can create a legal and safe collage masterboard for scanning. The first element you might want to use in your work is book pages. So how do we know if a book is safe to use or the images in that book? Many people still use the date the book was published to decide if a book is still under copyright protection. Now, that might be fine if it was a published book in the USA and it was published before 1978, but even the USA have now moved to the 70-year copyright rule, which is used in many other countries as well as the UK and the USA. In the download, I've provided you 3 links. They're useful and they're helpful, and they are official links to copyright law. They are fact sheets, so they are not the full law. They're not too complicated to read. One is for the US, one is for the UK. I tend to only use books from those countries where I can. The other is for the Berne Convention, which was a collaboration of countries that got together to create a kind of a net, if you like, of copyright for a minimum requirement. It's a little bit more lengthy, but I would recommend you do read the US and the UK documents. Length of copyright is different from country to country, And again, I have posted a link into that document which provides you, it's a Wikipedia link which gives you the country and how long copyright lasts for in that country. It's a starting point for you to research further, but it's a really useful link for a starting point. Like I said, you need to do your research. It's always going to be your responsibility as the creator. I cannot tell you what copyright applies to books you have. You need to look at where the book was published and check the copyright for that country. It's a complicated process, but I'm going to try and explain it in simple terms. And like I said, I tend to use the British and American publications, which the 70-year rule applies to. When using a book, there are quite often more than one person involved. So you might have a writer, an illustrator, an editor. You need to start by researching the date of death for everyone involved in that publication. This is really not as complicated as you might think. And then you need to ensure that they have passed for more than 70 years at the end of that calendar year. So right now we're looking at books that the people involved have been passed since before 1950 to be safe. So let's look at this book. It doesn't have a cover on it, but it's called True Stories from English History. Now, this is by Oscar Browning, and Oscar Browning died in 1923. So this book, I am safe to use the book pages and obviously parts of that book in my collage. This particular book has two people involved. So the first is George Eliot, and this is actually in real life Mary Ann Evans. This is her pseudonym, and she passed away in 1880. So I know this book is pretty old. And then we've got A.H. Buckland, and A.H. Buckland died in 1927. So again, this book is safe for me to use. If it had images in it, I can use the images, providing I had researched the illustrator also. This book, this book's a little bit more complicated. There are two people involved with this book. So we've got T.S. Usherwood and C.J.A. Trimble. Now, I have been completely unable to find the dates that these people passed away. So this book I will not use. I would use it in a masterboard that I was going to cut up and use straight away, but I'm not going to use it in a masterboard I'm going to scan. In very simple terms, it's your responsibility to ensure that the books or pages you're using are out of copyright. So let's move on to look at postage stamps. Lots of people use postage stamps in their collages, and that's great. But if we're looking at using postage stamps in a collage that we intend to scan, we need to be really careful because there's a lot of law relating to postage stamps. It's complex, it changes from country to country. Some countries class postage stamps as artwork, in which case usually the image copyright law will apply for that country. Some consider postage stamps as government documents. Now that means there may be no copyright attached to that postage stamp, or it might be a completely different rule that is applied to that particular country and their postage stamps. In the link on the document for download, I've included another Commons Wikimedia link where you can see the copyright law that applies to each country. Now, for example, I might want to use these envelopes in my masterboard. So they have a postage stamp on them. Okay, so these are British stamps. So I need to look at the British stamps. Now, British stamps that were out before the 1st of October 1969 were Crown copyrighted, and that expired 50 years after they were issued. So these particular stamps will all be in the public domain. Anything after 1969 you cannot use, full stop. They are now owned by Royal Mail in their own right, so you cannot use them. The other thing is, if your stamp from Great Britain has a picture of the Queen on it, I certainly would not use it, because there is a whole heap of copyright rules attached to using the Queen's image, including on postage stamps. So if it has the Queen on it, avoid it. So let's talk about digital kits. If we're making a masterboard to scan, digital kits that you've purchased from a designer will almost certainly be a no-no. If you ask permission from the owner and they give you permission, which is very unlikely, always get that in writing. Some designers, especially their freebies, will only be allowed for personal use. It's safer to avoid digital kits. The kit I have provided for this particular course is designed for you to make your masterboards. Most of the images are in the public domain. I have cleaned them and resized them, that's all. But some of these are from my personal collection, and I am going to give you license to use them. They are all copyright safe according to the United Kingdom. Okay, so these ones, for example, are all scanned from one of my own books. And I have again resized them, cleaned them, and I am going to allow you to use these in your masterboards. Stickers will certainly be protected by law. Do not try to use them on a masterboard that you're going to scan. Doesn't matter where you've got them from. Don't use stickers. Rubber stamps and stencils, like I said before, they will be protected by copyright or angel policies. This is a really complex area, and if you're going to scan them, don't use them. We're going to look at how we can incorporate those after we've completed our masterboard. Vintage ephemera. This is a difficult one to determine. The thing to remember is a lot of ephemera will include artwork, things like matchboxes, tickets, receipts and invoices, for example. Some are easier to decide on than others. Personally, the first thing I do on things such as a receipt or an invoice is check the company name. If the company is still in business, I would recommend you don't use it. It's obviously entirely up to you. I would also recommend that you don't use any legal documents where the names are clearly legible. I personally only use legal documents that are from the 1800s and before. I wouldn't use anything newer than that. And if I did, I would only use elements that are unrecognisable with no names. Using the 70-year rule is safest. It's obviously a lot more difficult to use the 70-year rule as when the designer has passed, but I would certainly look at the dates on the document and decide how old it is and whether I think that's safe to use. As a rule, I use documents that are over 100 years old. I know they're going to be pretty okay and pretty safe to use, providing that company is not still in business. This is more of a personal preference. Like I said, it's up to you to make that decision whether you're going to use something or you're not going to use something. There are different levels of protection on materials that are out there. The site that you are looking at will state if the item is in the public domain and free to use. It will usually be represented by the copyright symbol, which is a C with the circle, and then it will have a line through it. It might state that you can use the item for commercial use, but you have to reference the original source. I tend to avoid those simply because it becomes quite complicated. You can put the source in your Etsy item description, but they may require more than that. It might say that they are unable to ascertain copyright. Again, I avoid those because you just don't know what's around the corner, what might come up in the future. There are a lot of different symbols for public domain and copyright, Creative Commons, etc. Most public domain sites will provide symbols to let you know what you are allowed to use the images for and what protection covers that work. Some sites use the copyright symbol, copyright free symbol and other Creative Commons symbols. I've included a link to a list of some of those in the download. So it's a little thing for you to look out for. So I've also given you a list of sites where you can start your search for copyright free images. You do need to check the terms, like I've said. Check the symbol, check the terms that site are allowing you to use each image and what they're allowing you to use those images for. I've given the archive.com, and this one is great because there are loads of catalogues for you to kind of take your search elsewhere. So there are lots of sites. Pixabay is mostly photographic work, and I often donate to Pixabay because these people they're not out of copyright. There is the public domain review, which again, if you find an image, scroll down to the source, you can go to the source, and then you have a whole new catalogue as well open to you for images that you can use. There is digital collections on the New York Public Library. I've given you the link for that. That's a whole rabbit hole you can go down through searches. And there's also public domain pictures. Publicdomainpictures.net. Some of them are free. I do the subscription, but I don't use them very much, so it depends on what type of work you do. You've got the Graphics Fairy. Again, some of the work on the Graphics Fairy is free for you to use, but they also do a monthly subscription with loads of images every week. Do not use images from Pinterest unless there is a link to the original site and the copyright information is available. That's the biggest advice I can give you. I've heard some horror stories of people using images from Pinterest. It's just not worth it. I'm not going to show you videos on how to search on these sites, but there are videos on YouTube if you want to look, and those videos will show you how to navigate some of these sites. They can be quite complicated, but once you know the site, you can navigate your way around fairly quickly. When downloading images off some of these sites, you are going to hit a few problems. The biggest problem is the image that you've decided you'd like to use is too small. The resolution may not be high enough for you to use it digitally. There might also be too large. This is often the case. And you're going to need to have some way to edit these images to arrange them in a way that you're going to be able to print them. Let's get on and make some masterboards. So I've printed out some of the images from the digital kit that came along with the course. I'm also going to be using some books. I may use some envelopes, and I have some ephemera that we're going to look through too and make a decision on whether we should use it or not. I'm going to do a 12 by 12 on a piece of scrapbook paper that I don't want, and I'm also going to do an A4 masterboard. Now, the thing you need to remember is you can cut these down and scan them, or you can scan them before you cut them down. We're going to do a kind of a collage and then scan, and then we're going to decorate more and then scan again, and then we're going to look at how we can use these masterboards after that.